Hello everybody, it's Daniel Bentinck, and today we're going to be making this planet scene. We are actually going to be making not only the planet itself, but the flame effect you see right now, the actual flames engulfing the planet and just engulfing it in smoke and ash. So if you enjoy material nodes in Blender, then this is a tutorial for you. This will be a 6-part series, the first covering the scene setup and the planet surface material, then clouds and atmosphere materials, then the backdrop material with the stars and nebula on the backdrop, and then our cloud ash material, then the destruction animation where our clouds come across with the flames, and then finally tweaking our scene, our shaders, and our final rendering. It's all materials, it's 100% procedural, so let's get right into it. Okay, so let's start a new scene. So we've got our default items here. Let's just get rid of the cube and let's bring in a sphere. So you've got 3 choices here. You can bring in the UV sphere, which is what most would do for bringing in a sphere. I'm personally not, because I don't actually like the topology of a sphere. The way it comes to a center point at the poles is not really the greatest, especially when you subdivide. So we are actually going to use an icosphere, but I'll actually go over one more method before we begin. So we can use a cube and we can actually subdivide it. So I've just pressed Control 2 to add a subdivision modifier to level 2, which if we go to the modifiers tab, we can see here. So subdivision modifier level 2. So we can up that level, and let's just go right click on the viewport, click smooth shading, just so that it gets rid of that the flat shading of the faces. And then if we actually add a deform, a cast modifier, so it's already set to sphere by default, which is what we want, and the factor is 0.5. We actually want it at 1. So now it's casting to the shape of a sphere. So if we turn this off with this button, now we can see our subdivided cube, our smooth cube, is turning completely spherical. So if we apply all this, then we can see our topology. Now it's pretty good, it's pretty spherical. The thing I don't like about this is that the topology actually pinches towards the corners. Now that's not too bad. The good thing about this method is that it's made entirely of quads, which especially makes more subdivision, and if you want to do displacement, that will look better, but we're not really going to be doing displacement, so I am going to stick with an icosphere. So the reason I'm using an icosphere is just because all the faces are even. There's no pinching anywhere, there's no areas where there's more geometry, it's just all perfectly uniform and even. So I'm going to just add that at subdivision level 4, and then I'm going to put a subdivision modifier on it. So we'll go to, we'll take it to level 2, and we'll hit smooth shading again. So this is pretty much the only object with geometry that we're going to be using in these tutorials. Okay, so this is going to be our planet. So if we just split off our view here in the corner, we can change this view to shader editor, and this is the view we're going to be using most of the time. So now I'll just set the view of my camera. So I'll press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view, and then I'll press Control Alt 0 on the numpad, and that just snaps our camera to our current view. And so just pressing G to grab the camera and the middle mouse while in the camera view. The other thing I'm going to do, so we're in EEVEE mode at the moment, we'll stay there for now. We'll just go to rendered view, and the other thing we want to do is just to get rid of our background. So we'll make it black, and then we'll add in a sun lamp. So we'll Shift A to add an object in, we'll go to lights, sun lamp, and then we'll just set that, go into rendered view, set that to the angle we want. It's actually good if you split the viewport and you have 2 viewports, so that you can press 0 to go to the camera view, and then you can actually use your other viewport to set the position of your light. The great thing about a sun lamp is it acts as if as a light that is infinitely far away, so all your shadows point in exactly the same direction. So rather than like spawning in a point light, which we would need to put far away from the scene, which would be annoying to deal with, we can just have our sun lamp, which no matter where we put it, it's always projecting in the direction of this line, as you can see. Alright, so I'll rotate it a bit more. Yeah, we'll get that sort of crescent of darkness that you can see here. I think that's all right. So that's our lighting setup. I actually prefer it to be a bit brighter, if I'm being honest. I usually put it to about 2. There we go. Now let's go back to our shader editor. So we'll press, go to Materials tab, press New, and this is going to be the material that we are going to be using to make our planet surface. So go to Camera View. Now let's delete the principled shader. I'm actually going to use a shader setup that's less complex. The principled just has so many variables that we don't need. So I'm just going to eliminate it right off the bat. So first I'll start with an add shader. And then we'll put in a diffuse and a glossy. So just making a very simple dielectric shader. And now, usually when you're making a shader like this, you'd usually use a mix shader and mix the two together. What I actually prefer to do is to add my two shaders together and then mix my glossy between the glossy and nothing at all. And what that does is, if we were to just have a mix and a glossy, a diffuse and a glossy mixed together, it basically means that we're seeing part glossy and part diffuse. Now that's okay, and it'll look okay, and quite similar to the method I'm using. So if you want to use it, you can. I just prefer my method because what it actually does is it ensures that we're always seeing diffuse and we're adding glossy onto it as a layer. Whereas this, it becomes completely reflective if we go one side, and then it becomes completely diffuse if we go the other side. So if we wanted to add in Fresnel for more realism, which creates like the reflections on edges, then it would be nearly totally glossy on the edges. But I want to actually still include the diffuse and have the glossy on top of it. So that's why I do it like this. So we've added our shaders together. We've got our glossy mixed between itself and nothing. And so we can basically set the amount of our glossy here. And to make that more realistic, I'm actually going to use a Fresnel node. So if we go to Input, then we can plug in right here. So our IOR by default, or index of refraction, is 1.45. It's fine, you can leave it like that. And that just is going to create more reflection along the edges. So we'll set our roughness here. Yeah, and as you can see, it just creates more reflection on the edges. It becomes a lot sharper. Alright, so now we're going to make our color. So a lot of this actually has to do with a noise texture. So a lot of this is just going to be procedural textures. So let's begin with a noise. And let's just press Control T if you've got the Node Wrangler add-on on. I'll actually tell you how to turn that on. So if we go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. Now if we go to Node Wrangler, I believe it's on by default, I'm not sure. But if it's not on for you, you'll just need to click this checkbox and then go down to this button and Save Preferences. And that just adds in a bunch of shortcuts that make using nodes quicker. So then we can press Control T on our texture and it automatically adds in the mapping and the coordinate node. And we'll just leave it by default, which is generated. And then if we plug this in to our color, and we'll also get a color ramp. This will allow us to control our actual colors that we see. And then we can see our colors coming in through the noise. So we can make whatever color we want. I'm going to go for a more sandy and reddish color. So make it look like a more dry world. Something like that. It's okay. We can always tweak later. But let's take a look at our noise texture. So I'll turn up the detail a bit, which just creates more roughness throughout the texture. And it's actually tied to our roughness level, so the more roughness we have, we start to notice a lot finer details. I'll just sharpen it so you guys can see. There we go. Alright. Yeah, that roughness just creates that sharpness. So I'll probably leave it at about there with high detail. And then I'll just pull this back. Now the other thing I'm going to do is actually add in another noise texture, and I'm going to put it through the original noise texture. So, and this is a really interesting trick. You can do this with any procedural texture. You can put textures through each other, and it opens up a plethora of possibilities. There's so many things you can do. You could put a noise through a Voronoi, or vice versa. You can put even another noise in, and you can see it just creates new levels of detail and breaks the shapes up. You see this very fine detail. It actually kind of looks like marble at this point. So yeah, very, very good way to break up and change the shapes you can make. But we'll just stick with 2 for now. And then we can basically change our scales. And it just creates all this interesting detail. So I'm going to actually make one of mine quite small. I'm actually going to add in a third color too. So let's add in a dark, less saturated tone. There we go, we're getting something. Yeah, a lot of it is just fine-tuning the settings you have once you have your shader. But we'll adjust our scale because I want the details to be a little bit more. You want to make sure you have levels of detail. Like you don't just want very little details like this. Like sure, like if you go up close, it looks cool. Like you got different areas and stuff, and that's great, high detail. So it's actually you get the illusion of it being a really big object. That's cool. But you also want large scale detail. So you want big shapes. Like when you look up at the moon, you can see there's patches that are darker and other patches that are brighter, and you have this sort of shape, these shapes. I mean, a lot of people say that there's like a face on it because it has those big shapes that you can see, and so it's something more like this, and that becomes more readable at a distance, and it looks kind of cool. You could use that as like a moon for like a backdrop. So let's just actually make our stuff a little more readable. Alright, I'll just lower the saturation. Make sure it's not so crazy. Alright, I think we'll stick with that for now. Then we'll actually plug this into the normal. So this is how we're going to get our bumps. So if we go into our vector, we get a normal. Actually, no, sorry. We get a bump. And we stick that between our normal and our input. And this is basically going to tell us how to read the information we're putting into it. And we want to put it into the height, not the normal socket, which it puts in by default. And don't worry that it's colored. It's going to automatically treat it like a black and white map when you put it into the height. But as you can see, we can see our bumps coming through. And it's actually good practice to plug your normal into every shader that you have that has a normal. So let's plug it in there. And we also want it on our Fresnel, because basically what our Fresnel is doing is creating that more reflective edge along our geometry, but it's only working on the geometry at this point, the sphere. What plugging into the normal will do is whatever we plug into it, like these small details that we have now, it's actually going to put a sort of edge effect on those little crevices that we have now. So for more detail, just add that in. And yeah, as we can see, it's very strong. So what I actually want to do is I'm going to put in a math node and set it to multiply. Now I think I'm actually going to change to cycles now, because EEVEE is actually having trouble developing the shader. It's a bit of lag each time, and that's only going to get worse. And this is only a simple shader at this point, so it's just something that EEVEE isn't as good at as cycles. Cycles is much faster. You can make updates and it just works. It also depends on your hardware. Maybe yours will be a lot quicker depending on what setup you've got. But I've just noticed mine gets quite slow, and I have immediate response when I use cycles. So we're going to just stick with cycles. The great thing is that the shaders we're going to be working with will work in both cycles and EEVEE, and they will look good in both. There's no tricks that we're going to be using today that only cycles can do. Alright, so let's just take a look. Lower it. Sorry, let me just plug it into all of them. Whoops. My bad, sorry, had some things plugged in the wrong area. Alright, normal. There we go. Okay, now the other thing to keep in mind is to actually keep your bumps fairly low. You can put them wherever you like, but I've just noticed it actually sort of determines the scale of your world. If you have really big like mountain ranges and crevices and valleys and everything, if your details are very obvious, then it sort of makes the planet look smaller. It's like, oh, it's a little moon with a lot of, big things on it. But if you turn it down and make it a lot more subtle, then it actually makes your planet look a lot smoother and larger, as if it's a really huge surface with lots of details on it. So keep that in mind. But yeah, we can definitely see it showing up on the shadow line. We see some of those crevices. I actually think I want to up my roughness just a bit. Alright, so now we're actually going to create some more color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a third noise texture along this chain, but we're going to branch off here. Put it in there, and then we'll just get another color ramp which we've duplicated, and then mix it. So we'll get a color mix, and then I'm actually going to set it to darken. Alright, so you can see we can get some details coming up, and you can put it to whatever blending mode you want. Man, that looks interesting. Yeah, you can create some really interesting effects. Lighten. Yeah, lots of cool stuff. I just wanted to use darken so that we get some more dark patches coming in. And we'll just adjust the scale of that. There we go. Alright. And I think I'll just tone it down. But yeah, let's just, if we press M to mute the node, we can see the difference it's having. So yeah, a lot of change there. I'll actually just adjust this one. There we go. I've just adjusted the scale a little more. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Alright, so now let's actually plug that into our multiply as well so that we get the bumping effect of all those new details. Alright. And that's pretty much most of our color. We will add in a couple layers soon. So let's actually do that now. So what I want is to actually create some ridges and crevices like chasms or a river system. So let's add in a wave texture. So we'll actually connect this to our mapping node as well, just so that we're not creating more nodes. Alright. So we'll plug this in. We'll actually take a look at it on its own, so we'll plug it into the material. That's what we get to begin with. Alright, so now let's actually change the scale. And we can add distortion, so we get waves, and then we can add more detail. Change the detail scale. And that just makes it smaller so you get finer waves. Alright, I'll probably stick with something like that. Got roughness as well. I'll keep it high so we've got a lot of detail, but yeah, we'll go down to there. Alright. Alright, just adding in my nodes so that I can control it. Multiply so that I control the amount of bump. And color ramp so that I can cut off areas if I desire. That's just a good rule of thumb so that I can manipulate the texture how I want. Alright, now I'm actually going to add a noise texture. Another color ramp. And then we can actually set this to maximum. So that then we're only getting our waves coming up in certain areas. So now let's plug our planet back in and let's see what we've got. So let's just do this. Alright, let's just plug it in to begin with. So this is what we've got so far. Not really what I'm looking for. So if we just adjust some stuff. Alright, so I'll just change the color ramp setting to B-spline so that it softens the fall off of my noise. Let's actually, yeah, put it about there. Have it strong to begin with so we can see what it's doing. Hey guys, I just want to take this moment to pause the video for a moment because I actually realized I made a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to time-lapse this next section of the video and just do a voiceover to explain basically the things that I do so that you understand the tweaks I'm making to the wave texture and why I'm making them. It's just so that it makes sense for you guys. I don't want to just cut straight to where I get it right. And I'll just quickly explain that while it's time-lapsing. So let's go. Alright, so I set it to minimum, which actually isn't what I wanted. So basically what that did is it created a sort of flat look. As you can see, it sort of creates this area where there is no bump. It's like just a flat waterline look, which is what I was going for originally, but I realized that isn't what I wanted. But the important part is actually tweaking the waves, which you can see now. I make them thinner by adjusting the color ramp, and I then adjust my distortion and things like detail to create this very wavy look that you get right about now. And that's the look I was getting, this crazy erratic river sort of look. And I'm just tweaking the wave texture to get that sort of look, and I'm making my color ramp very tight so that I can actually make the waves very narrow and river-like on the planet. I wanted them to be small details. And now I'm using this color ramp from the noise texture to actually cut out sections so that it's not just covered in waves. So it just creates moments of rest and areas where there are no waves. And I don't really add any new nodes in this section, so that's why it's just, all it is just basically tweaking and getting certain bits right. So you see me adjusting my noise texture, it's changing where the actual waves are appearing, because what the noise texture is doing is it's just masking out where our waves are. But you see, I actually didn't like the way it was cutting into the planet at this point, so I was changing my math nodes to different settings to sort of find what I liked. I tried power, I tried multiply, I tried add, and I just wasn't happy with the way it was cutting into the world, and especially the way it interacted with the noise texture, masking things out. It just wasn't working for me. So I'm just tweaking, changing the settings here, nothing much. But then I actually tried power, which again I didn't like when I was when I was adding in the noise texture that masks the waves out. I had power for a while and I still wasn't liking it. But you can see I'm still tweaking the waves and the mask so that we can choose where our waves appear. I'm adjusting sliders to show how much the noise texture is having an effect on the mask. And then, yeah, I just change my waves again so that it becomes more squiggly and more fine. Just little settings like that to tweak how my waves look and where they appear. So yeah, nothing, no real new nodes, just simple tweaks, adjusting my sliders, seeing what they do, and creating an effect that I like. So we're nearly done. We're nearly at the point where I actually figured out what was wrong. Tweaking my noise texture a little more to mask things out. And yeah, I can see my mask isn't working properly with this setting, so I actually change it. Yeah, you can see me changing it here, and then I tried the clamp, which again I didn't like. That's just a little checkbox. And then I finally go to subtract my waves from my main chain of textures. And I add in an invert node as well. That's the only node I add in, just an invert in my waves, because by changing my math setting to subtract, it actually made them sort of come up. But I'll explain that again later. Alright, so that's pretty much it. This time lapse was just so that you guys could see everything I did up until we continue the video. But yeah, let's continue. So okay, I finally got it. Sorry about that. Man, I think I haven't done this before. Yeah, sorry. So we've got our multiplier, as you can see, same as before. That's changing the strength of our crevices. That's just after our wave texture here. But as you can see, I've thrown in an invert to invert the texture. And the reason for that is I actually changed where we add our waves to the rest of our bump to subtract. So, because we had it as add before, when I put it to subtract, it reversed it, making them come up as ridges. So I inverted it to rectify that. So yeah, the invert, changed it to subtract, and then this is multiply, just to cut out some of our waves. But it is looking pretty cool. I'll just make some of my waves look a little narrower. So a bit thick at the moment. Alright, that's looking pretty interesting. Yeah, just a really small detail. Cut it off just a little bit and then lower the intensity some more. So it's not too much. There we go, just something subtle. Alright, that'll do. Now what I'm going to do is add ridges. So we're actually going to do something similar, but the opposite. So let's actually copy all of this, because we're going to need it, and plug that into there. Not that we need it. By default, the procedural textures actually go map generated anyway, so you don't really need to plug them in, but it's just so that I have them all plugged into the same area. So like here I haven't plugged it in, like you don't have to. But anyway, let's plug our new set of textures in. Let's actually add this one. And now, yeah, we should get all these waves everywhere. I want to make them bigger though. So let's actually that's my noise texture, which just cuts out some of the waves in certain areas. But our wave texture, let's make it bigger. Let's pull it out so that it's not so sharp. Maybe we could use B-spline to soften it. Let's turn up our strength so that we can actually see what's going on for a bit. Alright, those are our waves. Pretty interesting. Alright, we'll leave the invert on. Okay, so now they're really sharp. Alright. Let's pull this out, see what happens. Should give it a more flat look. Yeah, it's evened it out. Whereas this has roughed it up. So yeah, we can change the roughness or how soft the actual waves are with this. I'll put them here so they become a little more visible again. And as you can see, like that in itself is a pretty interesting texture. So let's just tone down the scale by a bunch. Let me just pull this down a little more. And we'll get rid of this for a moment so we have our wave texture everywhere. Alright. There it is working. So yeah, a lot of big stuff happening. I don't want my ridges to be that big. Like I said, we want to keep stuff small. Don't want to detract from the scale of the world. That's interesting. you could use all these textures that we're using like completely differently if you wanted. You can make, even with the setup we've got now, we can make any number of planets just by changing the colors, changing the textures, the scale, all that stuff. That's what's so cool about it. So like we could have something that's, if we turn down the distortion, like you could have a planet that has, obviously, like I'm not putting much effort into it here, but because it's not what I'm gonna trying to do at the moment. But you have like striped ridges going around the equator of your planet if you wanted to, and just have like those stripes. If we turn it down, let's see if that improves how it looks. Yeah, let's just make it a bit bigger. Yeah, like you can have all these like ridges going along the equator if you wanted to, which is a pretty interesting look. But let me just turn it up for now. Alright, let's turn up the distortion again. Okay, oh yeah, it's flattening us up. Pull that in just a bit. I'll pull this in just a bit too. There we go. Now let's cut it off in certain areas. So we'll bring back our noise, so unmute that, so that we can cut it off. Seems like the distribution's pretty interesting. Alright, see how we go with that. Let's just bring up our scale again. And now lower the intensity. Alright, bring it up just a bit, maybe to there. It's very strong. Now it's like we have some mountain ranges. They're not too obvious. I'll just lower my distortion a little bit so they're straighter. And then make them a little smaller. It's too small. Alright, so now let's just plug that straight in to our material over here, so that we can see what's actually happening. Okay, so what I want to do is I actually want to use this to affect the color. Sorry, I probably plugged the wrong one in. Let's get this one. So we're getting everything. Alright, so we're just getting these little areas. I adjust my color ramp. I pull it in just a bit more. There we go. What we want to do is get a color ramp, plug it into the end of that effect, which we've got plugged into our output at the moment, and then just pull in the white to brighten it up a lot. Alright. So I'll plug our main output in now. Let me actually increase the scale, and then I'll increase my distortion amount. Make them a little more crazy. There we go. I'll break up the distribution a little bit by increasing the roughness of my noise texture as well. Just go a little bit more. Alright, now I'm actually going to lower the intensity of those bumps. Just get it to a level that you're happy with. That's good, in my opinion. Alright, now we'll go back to the color, and I actually want these effects to show up in the color. So we'll get a mix, and now we'll come back to our first set of waves, which were our crevices or our rivers and chasms. So that's this effect here, which is being subtracted into the main chain. So we'll grab this, plug that in, and now I can really grab, since we're using a mix, I can grab whatever color I like and put it in. Let's just do something weird so we can see it to begin with. Alright, so we notice nothing's really happening. That's because we wanted our color ramp, which we had before, that basically makes it a lot brighter. So we basically want a black, sort of black and white map. So we pull that up here, put that in, and then we actually want to see what this is doing, because I haven't checked what it looks like through the chasm part. Oh yeah, that's not bad. It's working. So let's pull it in just a bit more. Okay. Alright. That will just help the color come through. So let's use our main output now. And now that that's a factor... Oh yeah, we can see it working. Just gotta pull it out more. So we'll just plug in a math node at the end. So put this after it, and then we can do a multiply. There we go. Alright. That looks pretty interesting actually with the green. Not what we're looking for though. If you want to do that, you can. I am going to make mine dark. So I'm trying to get like the color of the dark patches on the planet. Just adjust it till you're happy with it. Okay, I might tone up the multiply. I might darken it a little more. Okay. Those crevices are actually quite strong, so I'm actually going to lower them again to a lower setting. There we go. Just to tone them down. And then I'll do the same for my mountains. So what was that? Yeah, so tone that down. Alright. And now we're going to do another mix and plug in our ridges or mountains. Put that into the factor. And I want this to be something bright. So now, probably need to do the same trick we did before with the math node. Multiply 5. There we go, now it's coming up. Alright, it's a little bit pink for my liking. You can really make this whatever color you want. Yeah, I'll go for the white look. I'll make it a little darker. A little more saturated. Yeah, and that just helps you get those little details in. So yeah, we've got our mountain ranges, we've got our crevices or rivers, and we've got our main shapes. And we've got it both in the color and the bump now, so that's pretty cool. The other thing I want to do is actually grab the color we've made and put that into the roughness. So that just creates more variation. So now we can see the dark areas are more reflective. And I'll get a color ramp and pull this. Actually, no, we don't really need to pull it in. We've got the full. If we pull it in, we'll lose detail. So I don't want to do that. I just want to change the levels. So I think it gets a little too reflective, so I'll pull this up. Might pull this down a little bit. Actually, no, we don't need to pull that down because that's already got the maximum of what's in here. So yeah, just so that there's not too much difference, but there's still some variation. And you can create as much variation as you like. So yeah, it can be helpful for like water and stuff, but we haven't incorporated that on this. Alright, so that concludes this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. So far we've got our planet's surface with its color, roughness and bump detail, all our little details like ridges and chasms. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Helps me out and encourages more tutorials about cool stuff in the future. But definitely keep an eye out because this is a series, and next video we will be making the atmosphere and the clouds for this planet. So keep an eye out for that, and we can keep going with this project. Alright, see you soon.